From Favorite Father Brown Stories, The Sign of the Broken Sword, Part 3. They are not often mentioned in modern war, said the other dispassionately, but in this affair one falls over the blessed sword everywhere. Well, what is there to that? Growled Flambeau. It was a twopence coloured sort of incident. The old man's blade breaking in his last battle. Anyone might bet the papers would get hold of it, as they have. On all these tombs and things, it's shown broken at the point. I hope you haven't dragged me up here through this polar expedition merely because two men with an eye for a picture saw St. Clair's broken sword. No, cried Father Brown with a sharp voice like a pistol shot. But who saw his unbroken sword? What do you mean? Cried the other, and stood still under the stars. They'd come abruptly out of the gray gates of the wood. I say, who saw his unbroken sword? Repeated Father Brown obstinately. Not the writer of the diary, anyhow. The general sheathed it in time. Flambeau looked about him in the moonlight, as a man struck blind might look in the sun, and his friend went on for the first time with eagerness. Flambeau, he cried, I cannot prove it, even after hunting through the tombs, but I am sure of it. Let me add just one more tiny fact that tips the whole thing over. The colonel, by a strange chance, was one of the first struck by a bullet. He was struck long before the troops came to close quarters. But he saw St. Clair's sword broken. Why was it broken? How was it broken? My friend, it was broken before the battle. Oh, said his friend with a sort of forlorn jocularity. And pray, where is the other piece? I can tell you, said the priest promptly. In the northeast corner of the cemetery of the Protestant cathedral at Belfast. Indeed? Inquired the other. Have you looked for it? I couldn't, replied Brown with frank regret. There's a great marble monument on top of it, a monument to the heroic Major Murray, who fell fighting gloriously at the famous battle of the Black River. Flambeau seemed suddenly galvanized into existence. You mean, he cried hoarsely, that General St. Clair hated Murray and murdered him on the field of battle because... You are still full of good and pure thoughts, said the other. It was worse than that. Well, said the large man, my stock of evil imagination is used up. The priest seemed really doubtful where to begin, and at last he said again, Where would a wise man hide a leaf in the forest? The other did not answer. If there were no forest, he would make a forest. And if he wished to hide a dead leaf, he would make a dead forest. There was still no reply, and the priest added still more mildly and quietly. And if a man had to hide a dead body, he would make a field of dead bodies to hide it in. Flambeau began to stamp forward with an intolerance of delay in time or space, but Father Brown went on as if he were continuing the last sentence. Sir Arthur St. Clair, as I have already said, was a man who read his Bible. That was what was the matter with him. When will people understand that it is useless for a man to read his Bible unless he also reads everybody else's Bible? A printer reads a Bible for misprints. A Mormon reads his Bible and finds polygamy. A Christian Scientist reads his and finds we have no arms and legs. St. Clair was an old Anglo-Indian Protestant soldier. Now just think what that might mean. And for heaven's sake, don't cant about it. It might mean a man physically formidable living under a tropic sun in an Oriental society and soaking himself without sense or guidance in an Oriental book. Of course, he read the Old Testament rather than the New. Of course, he found in the Old Testament anything that he wanted. Lust, tyranny, treason. Oh, I dare say he was honest, as you call it. But what is the good of a man being honest in his worship of dishonesty? In each of the hot and secret countries to which the man went, he kept a harem. He tortured witnesses. He amassed shameful gold. But certainly he would have said with steady eyes that he did it to the glory of the Lord. My own theology is sufficiently expressed by asking which Lord. Anyhow, is this about such evil that it opens door after door in hell and always into smaller and smaller chambers? This is the real case against crime, that a man does not become wilder and wilder, but only meaner and meaner. St. Clair was soon suffocated by difficulties of bribery and blackmail and needed more and more cash. And by the time of the Battle of Black River, he had fallen from world to that place which Dante makes the lowest floor of the universe. "What do you mean?" asked his friend again. "I mean that," retorted the cleric, and suddenly pointed at a puddle sealed with ice that shone in the moon. "Do you remember whom Dante put in the last circle of ice?" "The traitors," said Flambeau, and shuddered. As he looked around at the inhuman landscape of trees, with taunting and almost obscene outlines, he could almost fancy he was Dante, and the priest with the rivulet of voice was indeed a Virgil leading him through a land of eternal sins. The voice went on. Oliver, as you know, was quixotic, and would not permit a secret service and spies. The thing, however, was done, like many other things, behind his back. It was managed by my old friend Espado. He was the bright-clad fop whose hook nose got him called the Vulture. Posing as a sort of philanthropist at the front, he felt his way through the English army, and at last got his fingers on its one corrupt man. Please God! And that man at the top, St. Clair, was in foul need of money, and mountains of it. The discredited family doctor was threatening those extraordinary exposures that afterwards began and were broken off. Tales of monstrous and prehistoric things in Park Lane. Things done by an English evangelical that smelt like human sacrifice and hordes of slaves. Money was wanted, too, for his daughter's dowry, for to him the fame of wealth was as sweet as wealth itself. He snapped the last thread, whispered the word to Brazil, and wealth poured in from the enemies of England. But another man had talked to Espado the Vulture as well as he. Somehow, the dark, grim young major from Ulster had guessed the hideous truth, and when they walked slowly together down the road toward the bridge, Murray was telling the general that he must resign instantly or be court-martialed and shot. The general temporized with him till they came to the fringe of tropic trees by the bridge, and there, by the singing river with the sunlit palms, for I can see the picture, the general drew his saber and plunged it through the body of the major. The wintry road curved over a ridge in cutting frost, with cruel black shapes of bush and thicket, but Flambeau fancied that he saw beyond it faintly the edge of an areola that was not starlight and moonlight, but some fire such as made by men. He watched it as the tale drew to its close. St. Clair was a hellhound, but he was a hound of breed. Never, I'll swear, was he so lucid and so strong as when poor Murray lay a cold lump at his feet. Never in all his triumphs, as Captain Keith said truly, was the great man so great as he was in his last world-despised defeat. He looked coolly at his weapon to wipe off the blood. He saw the point he had planted between his victim's shoulders had broken off in the body. He saw quite calmly, as through a club window pane, all that must follow. He saw that men must find the unaccountable corpse, must extract the unaccountable sword point, must notice the unaccountable broken sword or absence of sword. He had killed, but not silenced. But his imperious intellect rose against the facer. There was one way yet. He could make the corpse less unaccountable. He could create a hill of corpses to cover this one. In 20 minutes, 800 English soldiers were marching down to their deaths. The warmer glow behind the black winter wood grew richer and brighter, and Flambeau strode on to reach it. Father Brown also quickened his stride, but he seemed merely absorbed in his tale. Such was the valor of that English thousand, and such the genius of their commander, that if they had at once attacked the hill, even their mad march might have met some luck. But the evil mind that played with them like pawns had other aims and reasons. They must remain in the marshes by the bridge at least till British corpses could be a common sight there. Then, for the last grand scene, the silver-haired soldier saint would give up his shattered sword to save the further slaughter. Oh, it was well organized for an impromptu. But I cannot prove, I think that it was while they stuck there in the bloody mire that someone doubted and someone guessed. He was mute a moment and then said, "There is a voice from nowhere that tells me the man who guessed was the lover, the man to wed the old man's child." "But what about Oliver and the hanging?" asked Flambeau. Oliver, partly from chivalry, partly from policy, seldom encumbered his march with captives, explained the narrator. He released everybody in most cases. He released everybody in this case. "Everybody but the general," said the tall man. "Everybody," said the priest. Flambeau knitted his black brows. "I don't grasp it at all yet," he said. "There is another picture, Flambeau," said Brown in his more mystical undertone. "I can't prove it, but I can do more, and I can see. There is a camp breaking up on the bare, torrid hills at morning, and Brazilian uniforms massed in blocks and columns to march. There is the red shirt and long black beard of Oliver, which blows as he stands, his broad-brimmed hat in his hand. He is saying farewell to the great enemy he is setting free, the simple, snow-headed English veteran who thanks him in the name of his men. The English remnant stand behind at attention. Beside them are stores and vehicles for the retreat. The drum roll. The Brazilians are moving. The English are still like statues. So they abide till the last hum and flash of the enemy have faded from the tropic horizon. Then they alter their postures at once. Like dead men coming to life, they turn their 50 faces upon the general. Faces not to be forgotten." Flambeau gave a great jump. "Ha!" he cried. "You don't mean—" "Yes," said Father Brown in a deep, moving voice. "It was an English hand that put the rope around St. Clair's neck. I believe the hand that put the ring on his daughter's finger. They were English hands that dragged him up to the tree of shame, the hands of men that had adored him and followed him to victory. And they were English souls, God pardon and endure us all, who stared at him swinging in that foreign sun on the green gallows of palm and prayed in their hatred that he might drop off into hell." As the two topped the ridge, there burst on them the strong scarlet light of a red-curtained English inn. It stood sideways in the road, as if standing aside in the amplitude of hospitality. Its 3 doors stood open with invitation, and even where they stood, they could hear the hum and laughter of humanity happy for a night. "I need not tell you more," said Father Brown. "They tried him in the wilderness and destroyed him, and then, for the honor of England and of his daughter, they took an oath to seal up forever the story of the traitor's purse and the assassin's sword blade. Perhaps, heaven help them, they tried to forget it. Let us try to forget it, anyhow, here in our inn." "With all my heart," said Flambeau, and was just striding into the bright, noisy bar when he stepped back and almost fell on the road. "Look there, in the devil's name," he cried, and pointed rigidly at the square wooden sign that overhung the road. It showed dimly the crude shape of a saber hilt and a shortened blade, and was inscribed in false archaic lettering, "The sign of the broken sword." "Were you not prepared?" asked Father Brown gently. "He's the god of this country. Half the inns and parks and streets are named after him and his story." "I thought we had done with the leper," cried Flambeau, and spat on the road. "You will never have done with him in England," said the priest, looking down. "While brass is strong and stone abides. His marble statues will erect the souls of proud, innocent boys for centuries. His village tomb will smell of loyalty as of lilies. Millions who never knew him shall love him like a father. This man whom the last few that knew him dealt with him like dung. He shall be a saint, and the truth shall never be told of him, because I have made up my mind at last. There is so much good and evil in breaking secrets that I put my conduct to a test. All these newspapers will perish. The anti-Brazil boom is already over. Oliver is already honored everywhere. But I told myself that if anywhere by name, in metal or marble, that will endure like the pyramids, Colonel Clancy or Captain Keith or President Oliver or any innocent man was wrongly blamed, that I would speak. If it were only that St. Clair was wrongly praised, I would be silent, and I will. They plunged into the red-curtained tavern, which was not only cozy, but even luxurious inside. On a table stood a silver model of the tomb of St. Clair, the silver head bowed, the silver sword broken. On the walls were colored photographs of the same scene, and of the system of wagonettes that took tours to see it. They sat down on the comfortable padded benches. "Come, it's cold," cried Father Brown. "Let's have some wine or beer." "Or brandy," said Flambeau. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope you come back when we start reading The Man in the Passage next time. Thanks so much for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.